Yeah. Okay, so before we get into this, I just want to give a quick disclaimer. First off, my results are definitely not typical. This was kind of weird, to be honest. The second thing is a lot of this has to do with luck and timing. The third thing is the title made you click, but I actually don't really attribute much at all to the bootcamp for me landing this first position. And I will go into that a little bit later in the video. And lastly, make sure to subscribe. We're giving away a dope mouse when we hit 1,000 subscribers. We're kind of getting there. We're like approaching 270 right now. So we should be there in a couple of months at this rate. But with all that being said, yes, it is true. I got a developer job after 8 weeks at a coding bootcamp. I really wasn't expecting this at all. For those of you who are subscribed to me, I made a video about a week or two ago now about getting my first interview. And a couple of weeks after the series of interviews that I went through with that company, I got a call from a representative with an offer to start a position. I really couldn't believe it for a couple of reasons. First off, I've been learning on a self-taught basis for about like the better part of a year how to code, just learning the basics of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and a little bit of React. But I joined a 6-month coding bootcamp about 2 months ago now with the hopes, the goal basically of landing my first junior developer position within 3 to 6 months after graduating. So still like 8 to 10 months from now. So when I casually applied to an entry-level part-time WordPress developer position, I really wasn't expecting much. I just thought of it as a way to basically dip my toes in the water of applying to positions and get some experience with interviewing. It's been a long time since I've gone through any interviews at all. So I just started applying and I got the job. Second thing is I didn't think I was qualified for the position. I haven't spent a ton of time in my boot camp, and for that reason I was kind of holding myself back from thinking I was ready to start applying. So here's the story. I was perusing LinkedIn one day looking at the job postings, which I've started to make a habit of doing. I'm doing it relatively regularly, and I've just been looking casually with the hopes of seeing what's out there, what's available, and really getting an idea of what the job market is like. You hear a lot about how tough the job market is these days, and I just kind of wanted to get some evidence and firsthand experience and a look into the job market in general. I've been thinking a lot about pursuing alternative roles after this coding bootcamp because of how competitive the job market is. Things like customer success engineer, help desk, and quality assurance are just 3 that I can kind of think of off the top of my head. The biggest benefit to these alternative positions is that they get you really close or relatively close to software engineers, and you're able to learn a lot, hopefully in a good position, about what it takes to fulfill that role properly. So those are the main jobs I've been looking at. But when I saw a job posting for a part-time WordPress developer that was entry level, it kind of seemed too much of a fit to pass up. So I went ahead and clicked on the job. And honestly, it kind of just got better from there. I opened the job and it seemed kind of too good to be true in terms of qualifications. They were specifically looking for, I'll read it here, a local candidate who is able to work remote, who has recently graduated from a coding bootcamp and was looking for their first position. The job description literally said that verbatim. So I really couldn't resist. I had to apply. The job posting was through a third party, so I filled out the application, found the recruiter on LinkedIn and made a connection request. And I also found the recruiter's email, went ahead and sent them an email with just kind of a paragraph breaking down who I was, why I was applying. I attached my resume that isn't optimized for the ATS system, so it's a little more polished and personable. And I sent a loom in the video, kind of just breaking down basically what the paragraph said. Sending that loom and the following looms after that was the biggest thing that got me this job, and I'll get more into that later on in this video. At this point, I wasn't really thinking much of the job, honestly. I applied with the intention of trying to move forward in the process, but I wasn't expecting to really hear back from anybody. But a few days later, I got a call from the recruiter asking to schedule a call, and I thought, cool, here's an opportunity to talk to somebody and get more experience. We had the call a few days later and it went pretty well. He was not technical. I could tell that he was basically just reading off of the spec sheet for this particular job. I couldn't ask him any technical questions, but I got some clarity on exactly what they were looking for in terms of soft qualifications and the basic framework that they were expecting me to understand, and I still fit pretty decently within that. So at that point, he said, great, I will pass this information on to the employer, and it's kind of in their hands now. So once again, I didn't write it off, but I just didn't think a ton about it. A few days later, I heard back from a representative from the company. And again, he was not technical. We had a talk about kind of what the company was looking for. And that lasted probably 20 or 25 minutes. But at the end of the call, he told me that I would likely, as a next step, hear from their tech lead. At this point, I got a little bit nervous. Up until now, it was really just casual conversations about the position. It wasn't technical in any sense. So it was pretty easy to just be personable and have a good conversation with people. And at this point, the next call would be a technical call. They set it up really well, though. It was kind of literally on the calendar. It said like a meet and greet with the tech lead's name. And that was about a week later when I heard back, and that got scheduled. If you want to know how that went in detail, check out my recent video I posted about getting that interview. I went into pretty granular detail on that, so I'm not going to get into it on this video. But right after that call, the second guy that I talked to called me and had some informal questions about pay, hours, etc. At this point, I didn't completely just skate around it, but I didn't say anything concrete so as not to kind of like nail myself down before I even had an offer in front of me. And lastly, I heard back from the same guy probably 3 days later, asking to schedule a talk with the CEO of the company. So this is atypical, obviously, but this is a pretty small firm. So you're not that far from the CEO at any given time. And he happens to have time a couple of days later to chat. So I set that up and we had our call. He asked a few questions about who I was and why I was interested in the role. And it was very casual. I asked him essentially why he was doing what he was doing, where his interest lied within the business. And I was just really trying to get an idea of where the business in general was at, what the training structure was like, what the culture was like, things like that. So we had a relatively casual conversation about getting into the company itself. And the next day I got an offer. Now, my goal with this channel is to be as honest as possible with all of you, so you can get a realistic idea of what it's like to get into tech. There's so many people on YouTube specifically telling you unrealistic things about getting into tech, and I'm choosing to go this route myself. So my goal with this channel is to be as transparent as possible about the process of getting into tech from my perspective. My perspective is going to be unique. It's not going to be your experience, but basically my goal is to do everything I can to bring as much clarity to you as possible. But first, folks, make sure to subscribe. Did I tell you we're doing a giveaway? It's pretty cool. If you're getting any value from what I'm doing here, come along for the ride. I would love to have you with me. All right, everyone, are you ready to get blown away by my developer pay? Get ready, because I can tell that you're not prepared for this. My life is about to completely change. My pay will be $22 an hour for 16 hours a week. All right, so it's not crazy. I am not making six figures. Damn it. In fact, it's quite low, but here's why I took it. First off, as far as entry-level WordPress developer jobs are concerned, it's relatively competitive. This is a part-time position, so I'm going to be getting paid a little bit less, and it's not that far off from the average full-time entry-level WordPress developer. Second off, it's comparable to pay for a position such as help desk, like I mentioned before, but it's an actual developer position, so it's much closer to where I ultimately want to be, which is a developer. I'm also going to be working with a software engineer who's using React, PHP, like basically working on the full WordPress stack to build out these websites. And just to fill you in with what I'm doing, if you haven't watched the previous video, basically I'll be using HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript to restyle older websites. The second thing, which I kind of just mentioned, is I'm going to be shoulder to shoulder with several full stack WordPress developers. Over the course of my time with this company, I can hopefully get some training from them that would allow me to transfer into a full-time position that's more like them. Now, I don't know what he makes. I'm not asking, but according to the internet, the average full stack WordPress developer makes about like $70,000 on average, and it gets up to right around six figures, 96, 102K, something like that. Though there's a ton of variation within the industry. I'm sure people make way more than that as WordPress devs, and some people make way less. Example. Third, this isn't going to make me much now, and I wouldn't be able to support my family on this alone, but being able to study and run my business at the same time makes the experience totally worth it. Now, I definitely want to get into a full-time position as soon as possible, and this position is potentially offering that as well. It's certainly not part of the formal offer, but it has been implied both overtly and covertly that this could potentially transfer into a full-time position. So that's a really cool prospect as well, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So how did all of this happen? Well, the first thing I'm attributing this to is luck. Basically, I saw the right job posting at the right time and I chose to apply. They just so happened to be looking for someone in my shoes and I made it through. The second thing is the initiative. You know, I got lucky finding this job posting, but if I was more timid, I might not have applied to it because I thought like, oh, I'm not a bootcamp grad. I'm just a couple of months into my bootcamp. But like, look, you never know what a company is looking for. And especially with something like this, so unique, a part-time position, you have to apply. You have to just take the leap. Other than that though, as far as applying to this job, I didn't do a ton, but I did do one thing, which was cash in my experience talking to you guys. I've learned a lot through making these videos and I've gotten slightly confident on camera over the course of the last, 20 videos that I've made. So that was very helpful and I decided to leverage that through sending looms to the people that I was communicating with the whole time. The first loom I sent was to the recruiter, basically saying hello, who I was, why I thought I would be a good fit, etc. The second loom I sent was to the second guy that I talked to rather, about like, hey, thanks for filling me in on the company culture. It sounds like you've had a great experience here. I do think that my skills align with this position, etc., etc. The third one was to the technical lead after our call. I was like, hey, look, I know I made a couple minor mistakes that we talked through, but I overall had a really good time meeting you. I do think I'd be a great fit for this job. And I'm so excited to learn what it takes to really excel at this job and to build up my skills. And the last one was the CEO saying like, look, man, I think you've done a really cool thing here. The company culture is reflected both not only in your employees, but in yourself. And I would love to be on board. There's a lot that I could say specifically about my scripting, but that's for another video. Now, I did this all while attending a coding bootcamp, but I really don't attribute much to the bootcamp for getting me this job, to be honest with you. First off, no one encouraged me to start applying this soon. That's not a problem necessarily, but it just wasn't encouraged by anyone. All the initiative to start applying in the first place just came from me. Second, I hadn't gotten far enough into the bootcamp to say that I was confidently a junior developer or whatever. And like I mentioned in my previous video, basically everything that I was interviewed on, I had learned prior to going to coding bootcamp. The only thing that I can really attribute to the bootcamp is just a general confidence that I got being a bootcamp student for applying to this job that was so specifically looking for bootcamp grads. And I also used a really great introductory framework in the beginning of the interview that my career services person kind of taught us and helped me write out my own. And that was very helpful. It proved to be super effective and really calming, basically, because I had something to go to when somebody asked me, tell me about yourself. But truly, that is all that I can attribute to the bootcamp. The rest was timing and just taking the initiative to try to stand out a little bit compared to all the other applicants. If I could leave you with one thing from this video, it would be to remember that many people applying for jobs barely try, and those that do are rarely thinking out of the box with their approach. So find something that you can do that is 10% more unique than everyone else, and you'll be in the top 5% of candidates as far as visibility is concerned. And when your skills are limited, visibility is everything. So that's what I did with my looms. That's what I'm doing with you here right now, establishing my communication and skills like that in general. So that's how I did it. That's all for now. Thanks, guys.